Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is our chance to join the conversation today. Sometimes it gets so busy we don't have a chance to get too many phone calls, but we'll try to rectify that and make sure that you can join the conversation. 1-800-351-1212. We will start off looking at religious liberty issues, as we so often do this Friday, and especially today. There will be quite a few that we'll talk about. We'll look back to the Democratic debate. Also have quite a bit to say about Ben Carson. I've posted this article by Dennis Prager, "The Left Really Hates Ben Carson." He will be with us next week, partially because he has decided to take a break from campaigning to actually promote his book, which again says something about him and the importance of getting these ideas out. And a little bit later, we'll talk about some of the job numbers, the Speaker of the House race, what is happening overseas in terms of Syria and ISIS, and even some of the wave of violence in Israel, if we can get to all of that. And oftentimes that is an impossibility, but we'll use our electronic shoehorn to see if we can get in much in as we can. Sitting across from me today, Jeremy Dice is the Senior Counsel for Liberty Institute. He is an individual that graduated from Taylor University as well as the West Virginia School of Law. You see him on television quite often, and he's been on this program many times. So, Jeremy, thanks for joining us today.
It is always good to be here. It's good to be on with you this time. I've been here a couple times with Penna, and it's good to see you back in the chair.
Well, it's good to have you here as part of this, and you might be heading up to the state of Washington. I know you have one of your colleagues up there right now. To go to the website, pointofview.net, is about this. From praying with his players at the end of the game. Now, this week we've been talking a lot about the movie Woodlawn, and that, of course, is a story where you have the coach become a Christian, prays with his students, and prays with the football players, and gets baptized and all the rest. And we've had Devon Franklin even sitting in that chair the other day talking about this. But now we have a ruling coming down that says that this individual, this coach, cannot walk to the 50-yard line and give a personal prayer. And I know that there are a lot of people that would like to know the backstory. So what is it?
Well, we got to go back to 2008, because if many of the listeners will recall, that's when we had the movie Facing the Giants come out. And I know for me, it was a pretty pivotal year to watch that movie. It was very moving. I'm sure for a lot of people it was. But I think especially for a lot of the football coaches around the country, that was an especially poignant movie. And a guy like Joe Kennedy, who was himself a former Marine. I'm not sure we're allowed to call them former. They're always just Marines.
They're always Marines.
They're always
right.
Marines
that
here. He served in the Marine Corps for 20 years.
Semper Fi.
And in 2008, he was hired as the head coach for the junior varsity football team at Bremerton High School, and as an assistant coach for the varsity team. And after watching Facing the Giants, it was really motivated or moved to begin applying some of the principles he learned in that movie to his own practice. And so, just on his own, after all of his coaching duties were done, after the game was called and the players were leaving the field, heading to the locker rooms, the refs had already gone home, the fans were starting to trickle out, he'd walk out to the middle of the 50-yard line and just start praying. And now he would pray verbally out loud, not just quietly, but he felt convicted that was something he was supposed to be doing. And slowly but surely, oddly, obviously, when he starts walking in the middle of the field, his players begin going, "Coach, what you doing?" And so he said, "Well, look, I'm out there praying." And they said, "Well, what are you praying about?" And he would respond by saying, "You know what? I was just thanking God for you guys. And I was praying for your safety and thanking God for this football game, for the opportunity to be doing all this kind of stuff." And they pretty soon they started kind of following this coach out to the 50-yard line. First, it was a group of like 3 guys. It's like, yeah, let's follow the coach and go do that. Coach just he never invited them to come out, never told them they had to come out, never actually mentioned it. He just did it.
Yeah.
And before long, as you can go on libertyinstitute.org and look at, there's all kinds of pictures now of teammates from both teams after the game's done, coming out to the middle of the field, taking a knee, and everybody praying. Now, look, this is perfectly constitutional, and here's why. That is not during his time as an instructor or as an employee of the state. He's just a private citizen walking on the field saying a prayer. It'd be just like Joe Schmo coming from the top level of the stands, walking down on the 50-yard line and starting to pray. But people got a little bit concerned about this, or somebody got a little bee in the bonnet about it, because they sent a complaint into the school, and the school started doing an investigation about this. This is this past September now. And at the conclusion of that investigation, what was discovered was, or what was concluded was, that the school sent him a letter saying, you've got to stop this practice. You've got to stop it right now. And if not, you could face sanctions up to and including being terminated from your position.
Yes. Well, again, this is what they were talking about. Your talks with students may not include religious expression, including prayer. Now, one of your colleagues, Hiram Sasser, is up there right now, and a lot of us that have watched some of the interviews have it with him. Maybe next week you'll be up there. But again, Hiram said the prayers of Coach Kennedy's private religious speech, and no reasonable observer could conclude that the sponsors or endorses or encourages student participation, because like you said, it's voluntary. And this is really different than the case out of Santa Fe, Texas, where there you had it over the loudspeaker. Even there I disagree. They were trying to create a separation of prayer and player, you know, a separation of church and state, separation of player and prayer. But still, this is very different because it's voluntary. It's after the game. Nobody could anticipate and even argue that it's sponsorship. But after the game tonight, I got a feeling from what I'm hearing, he's going to go out to that 50-yard line. He's going to do it again.
Yeah, and I hope they brought in a couple more bleachers, because I suspect that the field's going to be rather full. Look, here's the deal. What they've basically told the coach that he has to do is that if any player comes up to him while he's mentioning anything that may touch upon religion, effectively, he's got to run away screaming from that player. I mean, it's ludicrous to think about that, but that's effectively what they've said, that if he's engaging in any kind of religious expression, he can't do that. He's got to check that at the door or at the schoolhouse gate when he comes onto the field. Well, unfortunately for the school district, we've got a holding in this country at the Supreme Court of the United States that's going on about 100 years now, that it has been the holding of this court at the Supreme Court level that neither students nor teachers shed their constitutional rights when they walk through the schoolhouse gates. That's, of course, the famous case of Tinker v. Des Moines.
Yeah.
And so teachers don't shed their religious liberty when they go to school any more than any other employee sheds their religious liberty when they go to work. And so it's important for us to preserve that right for Coach Kennedy to be able to go to the 50-yard line as a private citizen, to simply go out and to utter his religious beliefs out there. The school is wrong to denigrate his freedom to do that. And if they don't rescind that letter that they sent in September, we may be forced to take further action to preserve his religious liberty and preserve his employment. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. Not only will there be, I think, probably thousands of people at this game, but I suspect that he will not be alone on the 50-yard line.
No.
Worst case scenario, we could see Coach Kennedy being taken off the property by the school. I hope that doesn't happen. But effectively, they've told him to stop doing that, and if he does any more, he's going to be punished.
Well, cameras might be there, and we'll certainly cover it next week. But you mentioned he was a Marine, and I love his statement. I spent 20 years in the military defending the Constitution and the freedoms that everybody has. All of a sudden, I realized that people who work for the public schools don't have the same constitutional rights that everybody else has. You have heard about it today, and I'm sure you'll hear more about it over the next couple of weeks. Joe Kennedy. And if you'd like to know a little bit more, we have the article that appears in Liberty Institute. As a matter of fact, if you click on that first article, it will take you there. You can see a little bit about the case, some of the problem, and the possible legal action. All available at our website, pointofview.net, and also available at Liberty Institute. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
With all the congressional spending, there have been some emails circulating with common sense sayings written by wise people long ago. One of those is the 10 you cannots. If you've not seen them, here they are. Number 1, you cannot bring about prosperity by discouraging thrift. Number 2, you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. Number 3, you cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich. Number 4, you cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. Number 5, you cannot build character and courage by taking away man's initiative and independence. Number 6, you cannot help small men by tearing down big men. Number 7, you cannot lift the wage earner by pulling down the wage payer. Number 8, you cannot keep out of trouble by spending more than your income. Number 9, you cannot establish security on borrowed money. And number 10, you cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they will not do for themselves. Over the years, these have been incorrectly attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Actually, they were written in 1916 by Reverend William Botker, a Presbyterian clergyman and pamphlet writer. The confusion stemmed from a pamphlet published in 1942 entitled Lincoln on Limitations. The pamphlet had a Lincoln quote on one side and these statements by the pastor on the other side. You know, there is wisdom in these 10 you cannots. Unfortunately, we live in a world today that really believes that we can help one part of society by harming another part of society. We need to listen to this wise pastor before we enact more legislation that attempts to help some by harming others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Provident Films, Woodlawn, the true story of a spiritual awakening that saved a high school and shook a city. Woodlawn, in theaters now.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
In fact, once again, if you'd like to join our conversation already, we've put one issue on the table. Should a coach for a public high school be allowed to go to the 50-yard line after the game in a non-school sponsored event and pray? And, of course, there are administrators right now up there in Bremerton, Washington, that say you cannot do that. I'm fearful that they may want to take him off in handcuffs or at least censure him in some way. So this is why, again, it's important to support groups like Liberty Institute. Okay, I've got a couple action items for you, and we're going to move on to our next story because there are quite a few today. And the first is perhaps you would like to send a letter of support to Coach Joe Kennedy. And so go to the link we have here, libertyinstitute.org, or you can go through pointofview.net, and it will take you the same place. You'll see the picture of him, and what a good-looking guy, and a great coach. And as a matter of fact, I saw a very good review the other day from somebody who says, you know, I'm an agnostic, I don't go to church, but this is the kind of coach I wish my kids would have. Well, anyway, Next to it is a red button that says Letter of Support to Coach Kennedy. And we've done this from time to time, Chaplain Motter, for example, and others. And so if you would like to send a note of support, we've made it very easy for you to do so. So that's one action item. If you want to educate yourself about this issue, you mentioned the case Tinker versus Des Moines, and Kelly Shackelford did an available there at Liberty Institute called Supreme Irony. And the irony is, I'm smiling at this, because he was there with some of the people that were in that original case. And these are pretty much anti-war activist hippies, okay? And ACLU defended that. And I don't think the ACLU ever anticipated, there's the supreme irony, that which they used to defend those anti-war activists would later be used by you guys and others to defend religious liberty. But if you'd like to know more about that case, Kelly did just an outstanding job. I think Justice Alito said it was probably the best presentation ever given to the Historical Society of the U.S. Supreme Court. And you've had a chance to hear the testimony and read the book, haven't you?
Yeah, he's my boss, so I guess we've got to have a grain of salt when I compliment him on it all. But no, it is an excellent overview for especially a lay understanding of these sometimes difficult legal questions. Yes. Really puts the case of Tinker v. Des Moines in historical context and what it means for us today. And we use this case very heavily. It's a very famous case in education, First Amendment law, and it allows us to really understand that one sentence that I quoted, that students and teachers do not shed their constitutional rights when they walk through the schoolhouse gates. That's such a great general rule of thumb kind of understanding of this issue to have. So it's good for you to go to libertyinstitute.org, look that book up, call us if you can't find it. We'll be happy to send it to you. Perhaps you can drop a few dollars our way when you're there as well. That always helps cover the cost of such things. But, there are other things, like that article you mentioned in the Seattle Times, where this coach or this editorialist is saying, look, I'm really not a big supporter of these Liberty Institute guys in general. But I tell you what, I hope my kid is coached by a guy like Joe Kennedy.
Yeah.
And that's the reality. Look, you can find those things on our Twitter feeds at First Liberty or Facebook, whatever the Facebook.com/whatever it is for us here. You know how to find it on Facebook. These are stories that we get out there quite a bit, where it's important for us to realize that we may have a lot of different understandings of where the law is on these issues, but there are good people behind these things. And that's why it's so important not just to support the issue of religious liberty, which is of supreme importance, I think, but to also understand the real people behind these cases, like Joe Kennedy, who's facing the prospect of potentially losing his job because he dares to pray on the 50-yard line. I think Alex Kendrick, the director of Facing the Giants and the star of Facing the Giants, the coach in Facing the Giants, he said in a video on their Facebook page yesterday, supporting Coach Kennedy, look, I'll go to jail with you, Coach Kennedy, if they're going to put me in jail for praying. It reminds me of the old story. You remember there was a case we had a couple years ago with some seniors at a senior center here in Texas.
Yes, I remember that
Old
one.
Barney. You remember Old Barney's story? And there's a gentleman who had gone to World War II and fought for our freedoms.
This is in Balch Springs, just down the road from where we are.
That's right. Yeah. And at the press conference announcing, this is the senior center where the senior centers told the people there they can't pray over their meals or in their Bible studies, whatever it was going on. They just couldn't pray on campus. And so we represented them and had that resolved. But at the press conference announcing this issue, Kelly turned to the crowd, turned to the residents, the clients, and said, anybody want to say anything? And old Barney comes from the end of the line, walking up to the microphone and says, yeah, I'll say something. And he says, look, if they're going to put me in jail for this, I don't care as long as it tells them what I was put in there for. I was put in jail for praying. Thankfully, Barney did not have to go to jail, but we've seen things come awful close to that in a lot of different circumstances. Hopefully that will not happen to Coach Kennedy. I think cooler heads will prevail here. They'll understand the First Amendment rights implicated here.
I remember Barney also was wasn't he the one that said, I didn't fight in World War II for our constitutional rights to then be told I can't pray in the senior center. So
that's exactly right.
And of course, I remember the woman pulling up the trunk of the car, and she was kind of a fighting grandma. So, you don't want to pick a fight with some of the seniors, but also say, I don't think you want to pick a fight with a Marine who is a coach in Bremerton, Washington. So again, Jeremy mentioned just a minute ago, you can follow on Twitter and Facebook. If you go to his picture, right next to it, we have a picture of Facebook, and you click on that. That will take you to Advance Liberty, which is the Facebook page. If you click on the Twitter one, it takes you to First Liberty. That will get you to the Twitter page and all the others that you need, so you don't even have to look very hard. We have all of it at the website.
This is how much of a servant's heart that Point of View has. They have everything out there right for you to be able to click on right away.
Well, I guess that must be the only religious liberty case in the entire country. No, not hardly. Okay, let's go from the northwest to the southeast. And the case that we've been following for some time has to do with the Atlanta fire chief, Kelvin Cochran. And you may remember the story. This is a man that certainly has received all sorts of accolades. President Barack Obama appointed him as a U.S. Fire Administrator of the United States. He actually then returned to serve as Atlanta's fire chief. Just an outstanding individual who then got in trouble because he actually wrote a book And a few people that he gave it to liked it, but somehow it got to someone else, and the mayor said, wait a minute, this person actually believes in traditional marriage. Well, that's enough to get you fired, don't you think? So, of course, he has first was suspended, then fired. But now we have some very interesting things, Jeremy, because the city of Atlanta has made some what I call dangerous admissions in court. And it illustrates again that you probably, according to their perspective, have to leave your faith at the door of your office or the door of your workplace. And that's, of course, something that I know you've been paying attention to as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're paying attention to it specifically because we have another client in that same area who was a doctor who was hired by the Department of Public Health.
Oh, sure.
And he was fired in the same area. So we're paying that case is moving along in this area. So we're paying close attention to the one that is right before us here. But, the thing that is shocking to me, and I hope is shocking to those who are listening, just to get our senses around this again, is when this case broke, what was it, about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that?
Yeah.
There were two things that jumped out. One was the statement from the Atlanta mayor, Kasim Reed at the time, and I think he still is the mayor there. When this whole thing broke, we remember that what happened here is that Chief Cochran wrote a book, and the book talked about his religious beliefs on human sexuality. And so he laid them out as pretty well mainstream to what most Orthodox Christians believe today on human sexuality, and did it in a very gracious way. It was never combative about it all. It was just very kind, as he is. He's I've met him several times. I've had long discussions with him. He's a very sedate, kind man, very kind. And the mayor of Atlanta says, in regards to what he had written, I profoundly disagree with, and I am deeply disturbed by the sentiments expressed in the paperback regarding the LGBT community. It's interesting that the mayor is entitled to present his opinions of the fire chief,
yes,
and be willing to profoundly disagree with him and elsewise, but he's not finding himself terminated. But the more egregious quotation comes from the councilman, city councilman,
yes.
Juan, I don't know how you
Alex
actually pronounce his name.
That's right, yeah, Alex.
Yeah, and he goes on to say, I respect each individual's right to have their own thoughts, beliefs, and opinions. Now, we see that a lot, right? We see this all the time where especially liberals seem to say, you're welcome to have your thoughts,
Yes.
beliefs, and opinions.
You can believe anything you want, but you can't take it into the workplace.
Exactly, and that's what he goes on to say. But when you're a city employee and those thoughts, beliefs, and opinions are different from the city's, you have to check them at the door.
Yes.
Well, that's remarkable because apparently the city actually has the ability to have thoughts, beliefs, and opinions. I thought it was a municipality to provide for the common good of the city, things like sewer and police resources and things like that, not to be expressing beliefs and, I guess, according to Councilman Juan, religious beliefs and opinions? Does the city hold religious beliefs and opinions? Is that what we're being told here? But then you go on to say you have to check your own personal religious beliefs at the door. You've got to be an entirely secularist in order to be able to work in your job in Atlanta. That's wrong, and that's why this case and cases like ours are so terribly important.
You sort of have to figure out what's politically correct, and if you're just even a little bit stray from political correctness, you can get in trouble. What are your thoughts? 1-800-351-1212. We have a lot more to talk about. Jeremy Dice with us, but again, we want to take your phone calls. 1-800-351-1212.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs, and it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your healthcare. For your free information guide, call 855-87-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical healthcare. Call 855-87-BIBLE. That's 855-87-BIBLE.
Take Kerby and the Truth Team with you wherever you go. You can listen, you can read, you can watch. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View radio app. Get it today, the Point of View radio app.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Weekend edition, if you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. Jeremy Dice with us, and he is the Senior Counsel for Liberty Institute. Talked about a couple of cases that we have articles for on our website. The first one, of course, having to do with Coach Joe Kennedy. Let me mention again that your action item there is to maybe send a letter of encouragement, and you can find that by going to Liberty Institute's website. Of course, we have a link there as well. Second one, for those of you that live in Georgia, the kind of admissions that have come out just in the last week, interestingly enough, about the Atlanta fire chief and what various individuals have said about the former fire chief, Calvin Cochran, are certainly in the news. I thought I'd pick off two more, and then we'll move on to some other topics. Let's head now to the state of Hawaii. And this one is also a somewhat of encouragement, because the colonel and commanding officer there basically told those people that were critical of what was happening there on the base to hang it on their beak. That's a nice way of saying what he said. But apparently there is a sign there that says, "God bless the military, their families, and the civilians who work with them." And so if you go to the Marine base there in Hawaii, this has been something to really encourage individuals, especially after 9/11. Well, Jeremy, as we well know, from time to time we talk about the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which is pretty much run out of the home of Mickey Weinstein. Actually, he lives with his mother, so it's actually her home, but whatever, we won't get into all this. They have basically said this is an unconstitutional establishment of religion. We cannot actually give preference to those who hold religious beliefs over those who do not, and those who prefer a monotheistic intervening God over other deities or theologies. I love what Franklin Graham said. You gotta be kidding me. And of course, the commanding officer, a Marine as well, was quite willing to tell them to take a long walk off a short pier.
Yeah, that's about that, and it's a long walk on that pier in Hawaii, no doubt. But yeah, you're exactly right. Look, the law, as he says in several times in response to the law, as their JAG officers, I'm sure, reviewed, is very clear on these things. Phrases like "God bless" have been with us since before the country was founded as a country. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Pilgrims and look at that kind of thing. But things like this, "In God We Trust," that phrase, the Pledge of Allegiance, and "One Nation Under God," these are things that are part of the history and heritage of our country. It's part of how we operate in ceremonies and in ceremonial greetings. Legislative prayers kind of fall under the same kind of category. So a sign that says "God bless the Marines" or "God bless whoever it was on this base," in no way, shape, or form could ever violate the Constitution. What Mikey Weinstein is trying to say here is that by having this sign erected on a military base, it is establishing a religion. The government is establishing a religion on par with the Church of England. Mm-hmm. Now, that's just silly. I mean, it's just plain out silly. There clearly is no effort to establish any form of religion whatsoever, nor is it given any type of preference to a specific religion. So any conclusion or any complaint about this issue must be rejected. I'm glad to see this colonel, I think he is.
Yes, he is.
To simply reject this. Frankly, I think Mikey has picked with the wrong guy. You don't mess with a Marine colonel.
Yeah, well, and I thought it was kind of interesting that Mikey Weinstein's not giving up. And again, he's with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which is a sort of a one-man organization.
Great oxymoron.
Yeah, but nevertheless, their group has vowed to send signs wishing blessings on the troops from the Jedi Church and the Church of Satan. And, of course, it's hard to actually take that very seriously, but nevertheless, those are just a couple of those issues as well.
It's just a mockery. Look, Mikey Weinstein is making a simple mockery of this issue, and he ought not to do so. Religious liberty is a very serious topic, a very important topic, and one very near and dear to the heart of our military, and important for good morale is the issue of religion, as people from, like George Washington, Dwight Eisenhower, all these guys have said is so important to the good order and well-being of our military. So, I would really appreciate it if our service members to continue to go forward and do good things for our country. They don't need this distraction. They're here to fight our wars, to protect our shores, to protect our citizens, not to worry about whatever issue of the day it might be out there on whatever any religious phrase that may pop up somewhere near someone in uniform. It's silly. It needs to stop.
Yes, I would think so. That's one of the reasons that I know that you have Michael Berry there, and you have a whole division now of Liberty Institute to address all these military issues. It was just a few years ago when Kelly and I knew each other that we even talked about, should we maybe do a Friday religious liberty issue? And at the time I was like, okay, do we have enough to even cover once a week? Well, we could cover something every single day, and the military wasn't even something we were addressing, and now that seems to have heated up tremendously. So it seems to me that your colleague Michael Berry and some others just have their work cut out for them simply because whether it's coming from Mickey Weinstein or whether it's coming from the Air Force or whether it's coming from the Joint Chiefs, it just seems every time we turn around, there's some issue where those men and women who serve us are actually being challenged in terms of religious liberty cases.
Look, these Marines, these sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines, Coast Guard members, the members of our service, multiple services, they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. What is in that Constitution is what? The First Amendment.
Yes.
It applies to them. They're upholding that for us and on our behalf, but it also applies to them also. And so that's why I'm so glad for Mike on our team, Mike Berry, himself a Marine, a longtime JAG officer, very well respected, has recently was invited to come back to D.C. to speak on these issues, teaching the appellate corps and the JAG corps about these issues and other things. Very well respected military attorney. He's on our team. And look, I would want to go into any fight with that man. I respect him so much, not only from a legal perspective, but just as a gentleman. He's a good man. But look, it seems like the left they want to use people that they can order around to carry their ideology forward. And nowhere else does that seem more presently than in the military. We see it somewhat in police officers, sheriff's patrols, and that sort of thing, where the left says, hey, you're called here to do a duty. You better not try to step out of bounds. Remember, you give up every right when you come into the military. That's just not true. It's not true. They've not been conscripted to override the First Amendment. It still applies to them, and we need to continue to fight for them even as they fight for us.
Let me again just salute those of you that serve in the military and talk about some of the things that I know Liberty Institute as well as other groups are doing to defend your rights. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Of course, we've talked about the coach. We've talked about the Atlanta fire chief. We've talked about the sign there in Hawaii. I thought I'd put one more on just before we take a break, and we'll move on to some other topics. And this one has disturbed me, and we were going to do an action item, but fortunately cooler heads did prevail. And that is in Hillsborough Community College in Florida. They actually voted to stop saying the Pledge of Allegiance. The argument was that some members expressed views that the pledge might make some people uncomfortable and that it violated their beliefs in academic freedom and the goals of course, that college. Now, my argument was going to be today, this was going to be my action item. Well, okay. If you think that makes people uncomfortable, it makes me uncomfortable that you cannot pledge allegiance to the government and to the country, so you should recognize that I think it's uncomfortable for you to receive tax dollars in this community college from the federal government. Uncomfortable that we actually are, through various student loans, providing a way for those students to go there. And some of you think that that might be inappropriate. I think it would be very inappropriate, as a matter of fact, for us to give tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars, to a community college that cannot bring itself to Pledge of Allegiance. Now, when that came out, fortunately, again, we're so often saved by the military. We had a number of those that were actually military individuals. Again, a former Marine, now a student, said that he and others fought to defend this very freedom so that they have the right to say the pledge or not. And so a special session was held. So we now probably don't need an action item to revoke that. But I thought it's kind of one of those issues that we should pay attention to, because after all, we're being told in the Democratic debate that we should provide free tuition. And if we're going to provide free tuition for individuals, and then those tuitions are paid for, and our tax dollars are paid to support federal programs that are in these colleges, and then we even have student loan programs that allow them to go there, if they think it's sort of inappropriate or even unconstitutional to have the Pledge of Allegiance, that's fine. We think it's inappropriate to send our tax dollars there. So I'd love to know what you have to think about that issue as well. Turns out that cooler heads did prevail. This was going to be our action item, and I'm glad that it did, but this is not the last time we're going to have some college students getting together saying, I just don't think we can really bring ourselves to actually require the Pledge of Allegiance at our council meetings. And I'm thinking, well, we just can't necessarily bring ourselves to send tax dollars to support some of that silliness. What are your thoughts? 1-800-351-1212. And we'll take some phone calls when we come back on these religious liberty issues, but then we'll also get into the Democratic debate and all sorts of other topics that are certainly relevant today. Let's take a break. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. In almost every case, it seems like the Marines have saved us, so this is Marine Day. Let's take a break. Love to hear from some of you. Marines, we'll be right back.
One of the most shocking details from the recent shooting in Roseburg, Oregon, was that the gunman reportedly singled out people who said they were Christian for fatal shots to the head. Turning Point Adventist Church sits a few miles from Roseburg's Umpqua Community College, where a young man who had earlier exhibited disdain for the Christian faith took 10 lives. The church's pastor, Lonnie Wibberding, asked his congregation that Sunday, if he had been pointing that gun at you, asking you if you were Christian, what would you have said? Believing saint, you will probably never hear this question, but there are Christian martyrs. Open Doors USA is an organization that works in countries that are highly repressive and restrictive toward Christians. Open Doors encourages and equips believers in these places for the persecution they face and advocates for them in the U.S. Open Doors president David Curry says of the shootings in Roseburg, unfortunately, this appears to be the latest example of growing hostility towards people who identify as Christian. He hopes the tragedy will cause Americans to soften their hearts toward Christians around the world for whom this kind of persecution is a daily occurrence. And, he said, I would also urge all of us to consider the privilege of religious freedom that we enjoy in the U.S. and advocate for those abroad who do not have it. Here in the U.S., we don't face that level of persecution, but there has been a decided rise in hostility toward Christians. It's becoming sort of an official prevailing hostility, not producing martyrs, but yielding some ugly results. At the same time, believers suffering for refusing to deny the principles of their faith taste some of the grace God extends to those that are martyred. The Bible refers frequently to martyrs. Think of Stephen, whose stoning is described in Acts chapter 7. Stephen testified of Christ and indicted the Jewish leaders of his day for rejecting God in the same way that their Old Testament ancestors had rejected him. Verse 54 says they were gnashing their teeth at him. Why? Because Stephen was telling the truth about their rejection of God's truth. Isn't this at the root of today's anti-Christian hostility? The gnashing of teeth toward biblically faithful Christians is more and more public and increasingly emanates from powerful elites, even from government. It doesn't result in deaths, but it affects livelihoods and good works done in Christ's name. Acts 7:56 describes what Stephen saw as he was about to be martyred. Jesus was standing at the right hand of God, ready to receive a hero into the kingdom. And Stephen exhibited a Christ-like attitude toward his murderers, saying, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Amidst this hatred and violence unleashed upon Stephen, the Bible says he fell asleep. God's eternal grace extends to the one who stands with him. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Weekend edition, we're going to get into the Democratic debate and some other issues, but let me take this opportunity now to take a number of your phone calls as quickly as we can. We'll get into some other topics, but certainly we've put religious liberty on the case and certainly some of the other issues related to that. So we'll head first to South Carolina. Andrew, thank you for calling today.
Thank you.
What would you like to add to the conversation?
First of all, just thank you for the wonderful thing. I think I listen to you guys every time I'm just driving by. I'm active duty Navy, and it is just so sad that some people in this country would want people not to believe that there is God. I would not want them to portray the signs of God. As an active duty person, I go every day working with patients, and the only thing that brings me sanity is believing that there is a God that watches over me day in and day out. So it is sad, but I applaud the colonel at the Hawaii base for doing what he did. You know, people need to step out and portray their faith and let people know that what we do, we stand for America, we defend our freedom and liberty, and we should be able to do whatever we do, especially those of us active duty. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your service. And again, I would, you're going to have to tell Michael Berry when you see him. He got a lot of press today because, again, these military issues are really important. And of course, we just mentioned the one there in Hawaii, but there's so many other. We have some good news about Chaplain Motter, but you have some others that are still sort of in the pipeline, don't you?
That's right. And first of all, Andrew, thank you so much for calling in and also for the service you give to this country. I know you deflect that praise very quickly because you're a man of honor. But we're grateful for your service in the Navy. And I hope and pray nothing ever comes of any kind of crackdown on your religious liberty. But please let me tell you that Liberty Institute stands behind you and your right to practice your faith, even in the military. Call us if anything goes southwise on you there. We got your six. But you're right. Chaplain Motter has thankfully been exonerated. He came this close to being brought up on charges and kicked out of the Navy. He was just in town, as a matter of fact, last Wednesday. No, it was this Wednesday. It was recently anyway. It was Monday. That's when it was.
Yeah.
I've been doing too much traveling.
Yes, Monday. I know you've been out and about.
But he was going from South Carolina where he was stationed. We were able to represent him well. He was completely exonerated of all of his charges, and he was given the choice of his next assignment.
That was really amazing. They
did
that.
Big deal. And he immediately chose San Diego, mainly because he said that's where his kids call home. That's where they think home is, and that's where he wants to go back to. Sweet, sweet family. A dear man walked through our office, shook every single person's hand in that office, and said, "If there's anything I can do, please let me know." And we're all sitting there going, "Anything you can do? Come on, what can we do more for you? You're the hero here."
Well, we want to get him in the studio here, so some of our listeners who've been praying for him and writing notes to him can hear from him as well. So
he's a great man, and trust me, he sends his thanks to each and every single one of you.
Yes. Let's take some more phone calls. We have all sorts of comments and opinions, and you are certainly welcome to give us your comments on some of these issues. Let's head out to California. Patty, you have the floor. What would you like to say to us today?
Good afternoon. You were mentioning that we should require people that retire, take our tax dollars at junior colleges or community colleges to pray. And quite frankly, no, we don't.
No, first of all, it's not pray. And I'm just simply saying that they said that we would no longer say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I say, okay, you don't have to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and also I don't have to support you with my tax dollars if you don't want to.
Well, in that comment, my tax dollars should go to all kinds of things I don't want it to go to. That's not my choice as an American. Unless it's oppressing me, my tax dollars go to a lot more things than I really care to dictate.
Well, I would certainly agree with you. We do not like our tax dollars going to all sorts of things like Planned Parenthood and even certain kinds of military actions.
Let's not address things like that. Let's address things like roadways and bridges.
Yeah.
Folks do those all the time. I just got done training some gentlemen that are on a construction site. Should I require them to pray every time we go out and do a job?
First of all, we're not talking about prayer. We're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance. That's a little different than prayer.
Oh, you're right. My bad. Pledge of Allegiance. I apologize. Pledge of Allegiance. And a lot of people like to add God into the Pledge of Allegiance.
And so
that was actually added after the fact.
Yeah. So again, you would think that we should not worry whether or not a student council or faculty council requires or does not require a Pledge of Allegiance. That's your bottom line, right?
Right. They're supposed to do education, not teach you religion. If one of those classes is teaching religion, you have that choice.
Yeah, again, I think you got we've got two issues here. Number one, we have been talking about some of these issues, like, for example, whether or not the coach, Joe Kennedy, can go on his own to the 50-yard line and pray, which he does as an individual. That's very different than the question as to whether or not the city council, the college council, the faculty council, the student council, or whatever decides whether or not they would want to keep the Pledge of Allegiance or drop it. Okay, they have that right to make that decision, but I think we also have that right to decide whether or not we need to fund that, especially at a time when we seem to be running anywhere from $18 to $19 trillion in debt. I can think of all sorts of things that I would like to defund. One, because I'd like to balance the budget, and two, because I don't necessarily need to fund all of the things and the silliness that takes place on a typical college campus. But again, let's get at least one more comment before we take a break from somebody else that might agree or disagree. We'll stay out in California. And Mary, what would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. And again, I think that it's because they're saying one nation under God. And there's a lot of people that are here that does not believe in God. So they want to take it out. I think that's one of the main reasons why they want to take it out. But they have to realize, those people that do come here, other people from other countries or people that have other beliefs, here in America, our forefathers, we're founded on the premises of God. On our money, it says, "In God we trust." So you need to conform to what we're doing here. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. But, why deny us the privilege of being able to do that when that's what we've been taught and that's what our nation is built on?
Okay, well, I appreciate your comments. And again, Jeremy, got all sorts of people reacting to that. And I just, again, think that if indeed particular college council, faculty council says, I just don't want to have Pledge of Allegiance anymore,
Yeah.
you're free to do so.
I think Mary states it pretty well.
Yeah.
In that we were founded this way. This is the history and character of our country. This is how we go about what we do. We're not afraid to mention God. In fact, no government official should be afraid of mentioning God. And certainly no assistant high school football coach or head coach of a JV football team in a state like Washington ought to be afraid of losing his job for simply being a private citizen who prays. That's not what our country was founded upon. Our country was founded by guys like John Adams, who said, in response to a question about the military, as a matter of fact, says, our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y. It is entirely inadequate to the government of any other. That's an important thing for us to consider, that our founding fathers were so keen on this issue to allow everybody to debate, and to, frankly, people like Patty who seem very angry about these issues, and I understand how passionate we can believe on these points, to allow this passionate discussion to go forward so that we can argue as adults. We can do that. We can debate. We can do that as adults as well, so that we might all search after the important purpose in life, that being the truth, and allow that truth to come to the top through the method of debate. But if we're going to censor everybody into saying you can't dare say this word or close your eyes too long over your lunch at school for being mistaken of praying or something like that, that is not what we do in this country. That's not freedom. Freedom allows people to be able to have differences of opinion and to be forcefully hold those opinions in public and hold them forward until they're convinced otherwise. Totalitarian countries put their foots on the mouths of people who dare to speak any religious faith. That's not what our country is, nor should it ever be, and I hope it never becomes such.
Good comments. First hour over, but we have a second hour, and if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We'll have more right after these important messages.
This is an on-the-go world, and now wherever you go, Point of View goes with you. Visit the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Point of View app. You can listen and watch the program live or play it again later. Get Kerby's Viewpoints commentary and click the Take Action link to make a difference in the world. You can also read articles, find a local radio station, and easily contact us with your comments or questions. Again, visit the Apple or Google Play Store today and get the app, the Point of View radio app. And one more thing, if you like it, click that button that says Donate Now and join the team. Point of View and the Point of View app, with you on the go.
From PureFlix Entertainment and Provident Films comes Woodlawn. Witness the true story of a spiritual awakening that saved a high school and shook a city.
I'm asking you right now to stand up and make a decision.
Woodlawn. Experience one hope, one truth, and one way. Starring Academy Award winner John Voight and Sean Astin. Woodlawn. In theaters now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Going to get into some of the things that took place this last week in the Democratic debates, but before we do so, we just have a few leftover phone calls from the first hour. We talked a little bit about this issue of religious liberty, talked about the fact that sometimes you have various schools that will say, well, we just, we really can't have things like the Pledge of Allegiance, and we just can't have that. And I'm going, sure, okay, that's fine. You can make that choice, but we can also make the choice as well as whether we want to fund some of those activities. And you know that it works the other way. I mean, you just think of some of the colleges right now, Christian colleges, some of the churches and others that wonder if they might lose their tax-exempt status because they don't go along with a 5-4 decision about the Supreme Court. There are people that say, maybe we should defund these projects that and people are involved in because they don't support the LGBT community. That's a reasonable conversation. We can decide whether we want to fund them or not. But it's always amazing how sometimes it gets real controversial when you turn the tables on some of those ideas and say, well, if you really don't think that's appropriate to have the Pledge of Allegiance, maybe it's not appropriate for us to fund it with our tax dollars. It's a conversation worth having, and it's one that we seem to be having quite at the moment. So let's hear what a few more of you have to say. We'll head out to Kentucky. Rhonda, thank you for joining us today. What would you like to add to the conversation?
Well, I'm just getting tired. I'm tired of them trying to take God and Christ out of everything. We're told we have to say happy holidays because it might offend somebody. Well, that offends me. If they want to say joyous Kwanzaa or happy Hanukkah or whatever their religion asserts to, that's fine. I can deal with that. But let me continue to say Merry Christmas.
I think the point I'd make, and I want to get Jeremy's comments about this, is, we don't want a sacred public square where you have to be forced to do something religious. But we also don't want a naked public square where the only way you can participate is to strip all religious values out. What we want is an open public square. And in an open public square, people can say happy holidays or Kwanzaa or Christmas. People can say, I will pray or I won't pray. But right now we have, at least in Bremerton, Washington, a statement that says you cannot pray. And if a student were to ask you a question, if one of your players was to ask you a question that had any kind of religious connotation, what I heard you say, Jeremy, is he's got to run away screaming, right?
That's exactly right. And look, what you're describing, Kerby, is exactly what our founding fathers created for us. It's only been in the very, or cover up the very words of any type of faith whatsoever, or to sandblast off the walls any reference to "in God we trust," or we've even had people sue to remove those words off of our currency. Next thing we're going to be knowing is we're going to be having people sue the estate of Francis Scott Key and try to get the words "in God we trust" and "this be our motto and God is our trust" in the fourth stanza, or the fourth verse of the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, well, we have to get rid of the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance. Actually, we can't post if you think about it, the Declaration of Independence, because the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times, either explicitly or implicitly.
That's right.
So that's what the kind of purging and the naked public square leads to, correct?
Yeah, no, look, I'm exactly with you and the caller. Just allow, the Founding Fathers realized, this is the beauty of our founding of our country and our country still today. The Founding Fathers in this country, that we were people with the ability to think and discern and to think well. What we have lost is not that construct. What we have lost is the willingness, the fortitude, the intestinal fortitude to be able to have these discussions about morality. We don't need to run away screaming and kicking every time the word God or faith or Jesus or even Allah or rabbis or anybody like that start speaking about faith. It's good for us to talk about this kind of thing. Now, I know it's the old saying is that in polite company, we don't discuss politics and are eternally consequential conversations to have. Look, our founding fathers understood the importance of a nation that is governed by a set of morality. And a nation that is governed without that morality is even more dangerous, or without that moral underpinning that is there. And I think we're seeing more and more of that today, where we're seeing a nation that is fleeing from the issues of a set of morality whatsoever. And instead saying, no, I'm self-reliant. We're exchanging out this sense of the other, something beyond us and our government and our God, to say, no, I am God myself, and so I think everybody needs to now accommodate and worship me. That's not what our founding fathers put into place.
Yeah,
they said, talk about it here openly and have the discussion.
Lots of times they say, well, I have the right to not be offended. Well, I'm sorry, you've been through graduate school. I've been through graduate school. I just think of the number of professors I had that were evolutionists, humanists. I had a Marxist professor. There are a lot of things I could be offended about, but that's called academic freedom. But I don't necessarily have to agree with those. But what I'm really kind of raising the question is, do I have to always support all of that?
Yeah.
It's just a question that is rarely asked because it's only used on the left side. If we find something we disagree with, then we can talk about removing the tax exempt status of churches and Christian organizations and Christian universities and things like that. But when you say, well, maybe we have to rethink whether or not we want to fund some of this silliness that happens on a college campus, either by deciding that maybe I won't go to that school, I won't support it as an alumnus, I won't pay for that, but also even the federal government, we won't endorse some of the kind of bizarre things that come out of these universities. And I'm just picking one, if you really... Is it that difficult to say the Pledge of Allegiance? Is it that difficult to have the Star-Spangled Banner, or do we have to strip all that out of there as well?
But it's all, look, what we're asking for and what the founding fathers put together was a country that was neutral towards the issue of religion, like a government that was neutral to the issue of religion. That is quite distinct from this college campus, from Council Member Juan in Atlanta, who are now out overtly hostile towards religion. I would settle for neutrality towards religion right now. I think you could probably go further, but at least I'd settle for neutrality. What we're seeing is a coach that's threatened with termination, a fire chief that was terminated because he brought his beliefs past the front door, and those beliefs happen to be different than the city's beliefs, and he didn't check them at the front door like some sort of garbage that can't be brought into or some sort of nuclear waste that can't be brought into the office that day, or a school that is not willing to say the Pledge of Allegiance, whatever it might be. This is silly, and the last caller gets it just right, and she sounds like the type of person that understands the common sense reality of things. For goodness sakes, this has got to stop. Our country was founded as a moral and religious country, allowing the debate to happen in the public square. It does not banish faith from the public square or from anywhere else in society. It says, no, that's valuable to this country. It's important that we have it here. Let's allow for its debate. And by the way, the secular element, that may also be helpful, so we're going to let them talk too. That's what free speech and the free exercise of religion means. It does not mean that you can have it in your head so long as it doesn't pop out elsewhere. And don't be fooled by that either, because before long, as we learned from a couple years ago in the Prop 8 trial, and Judge Vaughn even said that religious beliefs, this is just beliefs, things you think about in your head, can harm people. Now, if beliefs can begin to harm people, then we've got all kinds of problems, and the First Amendment completely is rendered meaningless.
I am so glad we got Ben Carson on the program next week. He's going to say a little bit about this issue of political correctness, so we'll just serve it up for him and let him knock it out of the park. We have a lot more phone calls. We'll take those right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
With all the congressional spending, there have been some emails circulating with common sense saying written by wise people long ago. One of those is the 10 you cannots. If you've not seen them, here they are. Number 1, you cannot bring about prosperity by discouraging thrift. Number 2, you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. Number 3, you cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich. Number 4, you cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. Number 5, you cannot build character and courage by taking away man's initiative and independence. Number 6, you cannot help small men by tearing down big men. Number 7, you cannot lift the wage earner by pulling down the wage payer. Number 8, you cannot keep out of trouble by spending more than your income. Number 9, you cannot establish security on borrowed money. And number 10, you cannot help men permanently by doing for them what they will not do for themselves. Over the years, these have been incorrectly attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Actually, they were written in 1916 by Reverend William Botker, a Presbyterian clergyman and pamphlet writer. The confusion stemmed from a pamphlet published in 1942 entitled Lincoln on Limitations. The pamphlet had a Lincoln quote on one side and these statements by the pastor on the other side. You know, there is wisdom in these 10 you cannots. Unfortunately, we live in a world today that really believes that we can help one part of society by harming another part of society. We need to listen to this wise pastor before we enact more legislation that attempts to help some by harming others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Provident Films, Woodlawn, the true story of a spiritual awakening that saved a high school and shook a city. Woodlawn, in theaters now.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Weekend edition, and again, we are privileged to have in studio with us today Jeremy Dice, and he is Senior Counsel with Liberty Institute. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. We will get to some of the other issues in the news in just a few minutes, but just a few leftover phone calls, so we'll head out to Texas this time. Ileana, thank you for calling today.
Yes, no problem. I just wanted to let you guys know that I was raised with a Pledge of Allegiance, and I am very proud of saying in God we are and we stand, because that is like, I feel like that has helped us out like since
sure
so long ago, like, you know, and it also is part of like what they teach us in school, like in history, and that's how our country got things. You know?
Sure. Yeah, and again, I'm going to let you take care of the baby there. Of course, we're a pro-life family, pro-life, all the rest, but I think we got the point, and that is there was a time not so long ago where every school child would say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's not happening so much now, and I guess somehow the Pledge of Allegiance got really controversial somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And as a result, as you point out, you don't want to push this too far, because the Star Spangled Banner, you know, in God We Trust, is in it as well. And that's the motto that's above the Speaker of the House and the House of Representatives. So you want to go down that road, well, pretty soon you're going to have to sandblast almost every one of the monuments in Washington, D.C. Of course, you've been defending these crosses. Maybe we should take down all those crosses in Arlington Cemetery. I mean, you start heading down this road, it's not a pleasant view of the future if indeed we do adopt this idea that only things that are secular can be in the public arena.
Yeah, look, I think of that sweet little one that must be in Ileana's arms there, who I'm sure you're doing a great job with that little person in your arms there, Ileana. Thank you for calling with that little guy or gal in the background there. You know, that's the generation that matters. That's why we do what we do at Point of View at Liberty Institute, to make sure that Ileana is able to teach this to her children. If you can't have the beliefs expressed in the public square, why can you have those beliefs expressed in your private home?
Yeah.
That's the reality of where these things are driving at. That's why we stand up for these things. People may not understand why we would defend a little tiny cross appearing on a tombstone in Arlington Cemetery. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Why can't we just have a flat white? Well, because ultimately, and it's not a hop, skip, and a jump, it's not barely even a slide, it gets you right to your front door. Think of Dr. Eric Walsh, as a matter of fact. I say this a lot when I'm in this program, but Dr. Walsh is our client in Atlanta, who was a lay minister as well as a director of public health. He preaches sermons in his own church, and he ends up being fired because of what he says in his pulpit. Now, how many times do you go to a Wednesday evening Bible study, or if you attend Sunday school, do you have certain beliefs that you think about, express, and talk about? Well, is that going to come up on your annual review at work?
Yeah.
How long before that starts happening? That's why we take these issues so terribly serious. Coach Joe Kennedy is praying out on the 50-yard line and is being told he might lose his job for that. What happens when you start praying on the street corner, or praying at your baseball game, at the Little League game, or praying around your dinner table? Yeah. That's why we fight to keep that line where it is right now and push it back further to restore the religious liberty that we've actually lost over the years in this country, because it is of such vital importance for that little one that was crying in that last call.
Sure.
And for the guys around my table at home, and for the kids and grandkids across this country. That's the country we're continuing to fight for and preserve.
Notice where some of these battles are taking place, too. I mean, Washington, okay, you say that maybe isn't as Christian, but we just talked about Atlanta a minute ago. How about going chief at Kelvin Cochran? I mean, these are not happening necessarily always in the, quote, blue states, although certainly you could say Washington would fit into that category. Hawaii might, but certainly when you go to Georgia, that looks like a pretty red state. So It isn't just happening in the places where a lot of people have voted to basically remove Christianity. It's also happening in states where Christianity, most people thought, was at the very center of the public life of individuals.
Yeah, well, they're happening in the heartland of every individual or every part. Look, a football coach, that's a lot of Americana right now. Football's a big deal in this country and has been for decades. It's happening in work itself, right? In your workplace, that's essential to who we are as a country. It's happening in the military. Is there anything more American, more patriotic than our military? How about sheriffs and police officers who are putting these decals saying "In God We Trust" on their cruisers and are being sent letters telling them that is wrong and illegal and insulting? That's not right, and it's touching upon. So it's not even an issue of rhetoric, Kerby. It's an issue of who we are as a country, what our character is and looks like. That's
What would you like to add to the conversation?
Yes, my name is Captain Donald Beverly Caroon.
Okay.
I was raised a Southern Baptist. I love the Lord, and I despise what's going on in this country. But to hear that someone as brave as that coach who walked out on the field on the 50-yard line and laid down all his embarrassment just to say, pray the Lord, what was the problem with that? And people who disagree with that, I really got one piece of scripture I want to quote. I have seen some bad times in the ocean. I've seen times I didn't think I'd get through. But I called on the name of the Lord, and I got through them. But to you people that don't know this, God gave him in Philippians chapter 2, 9 through 11. Read it. Please read it. It says God gave him a name and exalted above all others, that at the mention of his name, every knee will bow.
Every knee will bow.
In heaven,
yes,
and in earth, and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father Almighty. Now, don't wait. Knees. Because Satan himself is going to bow down. And if that's who you're looking up to, that I just quit for you.
Yeah, that's a good word, and just illustrates again some of the eternal consequences of all of that. A lot more that we can talk about, but I thought we would also get into the Democratic debate, because that's something that has surfaced as well. And a good friend Tim Wildman wrote a piece called "The Promise and Peril of Free Stuff." And he talked about the fact that he watched the debate, and of course he said what I said after the debate. That is, Anderson Cooper of CNN was the moderator, and the question was much tougher than he expected. And I thought it was really very well done on his part, although there were a lot of questions that could have been asked about everything from abortion to LGBT and same-sex marriage and the rest. But he went on to say, what I learned from the debate is that the Democrats plan to offer the American people a whole lot of new free stuff if one of them is elected president. This is one of the problems Republicans have to contend with. It's hard to out-free stuff the Democrats. And we traded some emails back and forth, and I said, yeah, kind of like Santa Claus. He said, no, Santa Claus can't hold a candle to what was done the other night. And that's a big issue, Jeremy, because we live in this world right now where a lot of people say, yeah, I'd like free tuition, and I'd like free health care, and I'd like all sorts of other free stuff that would come down the pike. But, of course, more intelligent and maybe more mature people are going to say, who's going to pay for all of this at a time when we're running $18 trillion national debt?
Yeah, look, I have such a hard time even beginning to comment on things like this in a way that is like kind or...
I've been pushing your buttons today, I know.
You have, but I tell you, this one is just remarkable to me, because do we really think that when Bernie Sanders says he wants to give college tuition to every single person in this country, does anybody stop and go, how's that going to work?
Yeah. How are you going to pay for that?
How are you going to pay for that? You don't have to go beyond having a lemonade stand to understand that you can't give stuff away for free and hope to make a profit, or hope to have it covered the cost of it all. In order for that to happen, you're going to have to put down the line everything else to be free to get to that point. It's just an impossibility.
Yeah.
I don't know what a democratic socialist is. That's a complete oxymoron to me. You can't have both of those things in the same sentence. So I hope and pray that there are level heads here. You know, I was listening to the radio on the way over here and looking at these campaign reports that are out there now, the finance reports. I think we ought to have a big concern. You've got between Clinton and Sanders right now, $56 million that both of them have raised?
Yeah.
That's some serious cash that are behind two very leftist, not even hiding it, not even trying to be moderate individuals anymore, that are, one is an avowed socialist, one is a disguised socialist. I tell you what, we've got to get on our horse and start working on some issues that is going to see conservatives put into office, and that right soon.
Well, again, they were calculating what this would all cost. They stopped at $6 billion just for what was said that night. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
This time of year, it seems everyone's looking for a better, more affordable healthcare solution. But with costs rising and options limited, where do you turn? If you're a Christian, you turn to Medishare. It's not insurance. It's over 154,000 believers who share each other's medical bills. It's about half the cost of healthcare insurance programs. And it's fully acceptable under the law. Best of all, Medishare is based on the timeless principles found in God's Word. You never pay for things that go against your beliefs. Medishare is healthcare that fits your family and your faith.
Learn how thousands of Christians can help you save on your health care. For your free information guide, call 855-87-BIBLE. Not available in Montana. Medishare, affordable biblical health care. Call 855-87-BIBLE. That's 855-87-BIBLE.
A big thank you to members of Truth Team 360. You make this program possible. Not a member yet? Join today at pointofview.net. Click on Donate Now and become a monthly partner. Pointofview.net.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour. If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talked about religious liberty and many issues related to that. And again, that's still fair game in this last half hour, 1-800-351-1212. But we've also looked back at the Democratic debate, and one of the pieces I read was from Tim Wildman. We'll see if we can post it. The promise and peril of free stuff. But I think you get the gist of it when he simply says, what I learned from the debate is that the Democratic plan is to offer the American people a whole lot of free stuff if one of them is elected president. And this is one of the problems Republicans have to contend with. It's hard to out free stuff the Democrats. And if indeed you're going to give away free college education and other candidates are jumping in with Me Too, and then you, of course, already supposedly giving away free health care and all the rest, you can see where that leads. For just a moment, I wanted to try to, and this may be a fool's errand, but Jeremy, you can help me out on this, try to inject a little bit of intelligence and a little common sense into this. And a number of years ago, I really took on the question, is it possible to tax the rich and have enough to pay for these programs? Now, these numbers are slightly out of date because we have had a little bit of a downturn in the economy and then we've had an uptick. But the last time individuals looked at this, they actually filed the Internal Revenue Service report, and they found at that time that if you define rich as those who have incomes of $10 million per year or more, you end up with 8,274 people. Okay, that's a total of $240 billion. So we're talking about Warren Buffett. We're talking about Bill Gates. We're talking about Larry Ellison. We're talking about Jeff Bezos. We're talking about the Koch brothers. We're talking about the people in the Walton family, Sam Walton's individuals, Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Bloomberg. These are the wealthiest people in America. Well, if you look at those, the incomes of those individuals are a total of $240 billion. That sounds like a lot. That helps you run the government for 24 days. So, and first of all, that's assuming that you could confiscate all of their income. And you would, if you could do that at the force of a gun once, you wouldn't be able to do it again next year, right? You see the problem with this? And so this fairy tale, well, we'll just tax the rich a lot more. First of all, I hate to admit it, but Warren Buffett and others have figured out ways that they don't pay taxes. As a matter of fact, it's say, okay, well, we need to go after more than just the billionaires and the people that make $10 million a year. We need to go after people that have $1 million a year. Okay, you had about 227,000 more, but again, that just doesn't even come close to covering a fraction of the deficit this year. Do you see what the problem is? It sounds like, oh yes, these rich just really need to pay their fair share. Frankly, a lot of them don't. Matter of fact, I looked at one of the figures and found there are 1,400 people that are millionaires or more who paid no income tax last year. Now, we can talk about getting tax fairness into that, making them pay their fair share, but you do not have enough money, even if you could confiscate that money at the point of a gun. There's just not that much money out there to actually pay for free tuition for everybody. And yet there are millions of people that vote for Bernie Sanders in these primaries and will vote for Hillary Clinton in the general election because I think it's a foregone conclusion she'll be the nominee, that have never looked at the numbers to recognize that this just simply doesn't work, even if you really believed that it was moral to do so. And, of course, that's the big issue. It's not constitutional or moral to do so anyway.
I remember my first job, I was paid $4.25 an hour, and I was so glad that I didn't get paid more. And there was a time when it was being paid a little bit more, but not a whole lot more, when I was working folding laundry all day long. That was my job, was to feed towels into a folding machine. It was one of the most boring jobs I've ever had.
I've heard you say that.
But it was, thankfully, my dad reminded me every time I come home from work, he said, well, you want to go back to college? Yeah, I do. It was a good reminder that there are bigger things out there, but it told me the value of hard work. Doing that job, there are other jobs that I did that I probably shouldn't talk about on air because they'll frankly turn your stomach, but I did them. I got paid fairly for them. And frankly, you could never be paid enough for some of the stuff that you had to do, but the work needs to get done, and it motivates you to go further and do more. And I worked with some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with in my life that are doing those jobs, and had, through the quality of their work, had increased their own salary over the years because they worked diligently. I think we've gone reverse on that now, that we're giving this entitlement culture.
Yes.
You're going to get the end result of you're entitled to the end result before having even to work for it all. That's wrong. You get what you earn, not what you deserve. If we got what we deserve, we probably get nothing at all.
I would certainly agree with that. Well, I won't try to outdo you, but I've been a janitor. I've worked in a machine shop. I've swung a jackhammer. I've put tile and other things, mostly asphalt, on roofs in the hot Texas. I do not recommend any of those either. So let's take some phone calls along the way, because maybe some of you have some comments about the Democratic debate. And, of course, we have an upcoming Republican debate in less than 2 weeks. And, of course, I mentioned we will have Ben Carson with us next week, and I'll say more about him in just a minute. But let's head out to California, KYCC. Chris, you have the floor.
Hey, that reminds me of my first job. I washed dishes for $4.25 an hour. No, I just wanted to say, the Democratic Party is just so hypocritical. The whole left agenda is hypocritical. I mean, you look at Hillary Clinton made a statement about CEOs making, 30 times more than the workers, or 300 times more. Well, she made $25 million last year, her and her husband. She's not squawking about that.
Yeah, you got to be real careful when you start criticizing the rich, because Bernie Sanders was saying, what? I'm the only person up here who's not a billionaire. And I thought, whoa, I knew all of them were millionaires, but I didn't realize they were all billionaires. I mean, that says something.
She also support, they put down the Koch brothers, but look, George Soros backs any Democratic.
Yes, of course.
Candidacy, and he has dual citizenship, which is kind of odd. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But he doesn't pay any taxes to this country.
Well, again, I just think there are all sorts of issues that deserve some attention, and you can't expect the mainstream press to cover them effectively. So that's certainly why, if nothing else, make sure you get some alternative sources of media, and I certainly hope that Point of View is one of those as well. Okay, I mentioned Ben Carson just a minute ago. One of the other articles that you saw that I posted there, Jeremy, was "The Left Really Hates Ben Carson." This is a piece by Dennis Prager. Dennis Prager's been on our program, and certainly appreciate him, and talks about some of the attacks. One about the fact that when he was asked about what he would do if somebody were to point a gun at him and ask what religion you are, he actually said, I might not just stand there and let them shoot me. I might say, hey, guys, everybody attack him. He may shoot me, but he can't get all of us. Well, that was misinterpreted to say that he was critical of those individuals in Roseburg, Oregon, and I think that's obviously wrong, and completely attempting to try to vilify him in one way or another. And then, of course, he had been asked about this issue of whether or not guns were important, and said in passing, just the likelihood of Hitler being able to accomplish his goals would have been greatly diminished if the people had been armed. Well, you can disagree as to whether or not having arms in the hands of Jews would have prevented the Holocaust. I doubt it. But this was labeled as anti-Semitic, and that's why I appreciate a Jewish believer like Dennis Prager saying that was not anti-Semitic. And, of course, now he's being criticized for saying that welfare perpetuates poverty. But the long knives are out right now for Ben Carson, and that is something that I think we should pay attention to, because as you will hear next week when he's on the program, and he's been on with us before, I've shared a stage with him, I've met him, I've met his wife Candy. He is such an honorable man, such a man of integrity. I just get so upset about how in so many different ways he's been vilified. Your thoughts?
Look, I'm a First Amendment guy, but I realize that they kind of go in order. And for decades now, they've been chipping away at the First Amendment. They've decided that one's kind of hanging on its last breath, so they're going to move to the Second Amendment now, too, it seems like. But I'm reminded, especially with this article, talking about putting it in a historical context where the right to bear arms has warded off so many attacks, literal attacks, not just psychological attacks or ideological attacks, but literal attacks. I'm reminded of the actual text of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's remarkable to us. This is how we preserved us a nation, and to be able to preserve that still to this day, to defend our families, to defend each other. Is it any wonder that these cowards are choosing gun-free zones to go into?
There you go.
To shoot people? But I think Carson's comment to the Fox News contributor here that Prager talks about, where he turns around and he may not answer the question. He tries to attack them. He may shoot me, but he can't get us all, he says. I go back to this kind of wimpification that we've got going on in our country. We did have that in this last shooting up in Oregon, if it was, or Utah, wherever that was, recently at the community college, where that Army veteran attacked the guy and saved a whole bunch of people as a result. It's great to see that kind of thing going on, but we've got too many people that are not standing up and protecting others, less fortunate others, people that they are less defensible in these situations. I wish we would have a gut check as a country and be willing to stand up for one another, protect each other, and gladly defend them.
Well, Ben Carson says he's actually taking a break from campaigning to go out and promote his book. So that's why we'll have a chance to talk with him next week. We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. We'll be back right after this.
One of the most shocking details from the recent shooting in Roseburg, Oregon, was that the gunman reportedly singled out people who said they were Christian for fatal shots to the head. Turning Point Adventist Church sits a few miles from Roseburg's Umpqua Community College, where a young man who had earlier exhibited disdain for the Christian faith took 10 lives. The church's pastor, Lonnie Wibberding, asked his congregation that Sunday, if he had been pointing that gun at you, asking you if you were Christian, what would you have said? Believing saint, you will probably never hear this question, but there are Christian martyrs. Open Doors USA is an organization that works in countries that are highly repressive and restrictive toward Christians. Open Doors encourages and equips believers in these places for the persecution they face and advocates for them in the U.S. Open Doors president David Curry says of the shootings in Roseburg, unfortunately, this appears to be the latest example of growing hostility towards people who identify as Christian. He hopes the tragedy will cause Americans to soften their hearts toward Christians around the world for whom this kind of persecution is a daily occurrence. And, he said, I would also urge all of us to consider the privilege of religious freedom that we enjoy in the U.S. and advocate for those abroad who do not have it. Here in the U.S., we don't face that level of persecution, but there has been a decided rise in hostility toward Christians. It's becoming sort of an official prevailing hostility, not producing martyrs, but yielding some ugly results. At the same time, believers suffering for refusing to deny the principles of their faith taste some of the grace God extends to those that are martyred. The Bible refers frequently to martyrs. Think of Stephen, whose stoning is described in Acts chapter 7. Stephen testified of Christ and indicted the Jewish leaders of his day for rejecting God in the same way that their Old Testament ancestors had rejected him. Verse 54 says they were gnashing their teeth at him. Why? Because Stephen was telling the truth about their rejection of God's truth. Isn't this at the root of today's anti-Christian hostility? The gnashing of teeth toward biblically faithful Christians is more and more public and increasingly emanates from powerful elites, even from government. It doesn't result in deaths, but it affects livelihoods and good works done in Christ's name. Acts 7:56 describes what Stephen saw as he was about to be martyred. Jesus was standing at the right hand of God, ready to receive a hero into the kingdom. And Stephen exhibited a Christ-like attitude toward his murderers, saying, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. Amidst this hatred and violence unleashed upon Stephen, the Bible says he fell asleep. God's eternal grace extends to the one who stands with him. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
After a few more minutes, we've covered a lot of issues, but there's certainly much more on the table. We'll probably get to those next week, but let's take another phone call. Jeremy Dice with me. Let's go to Jerry in South Carolina, WAGP. Jerry, thank you for calling today.
Well, thank y'all. Just real quick, I've been job hunting, so I've been looking at the cities I'm looking at online, and all of them except one score a D or F on crime. This one, which is an A+, I also discovered has a law that every homeowner in the city must have a firearm in the house with ammunition.
You're thinking of Georgia, aren't you?
Kennesaw, Georgia.
Kennesaw, Georgia. That is right. It's just like the requirement there in Switzerland. And so it's kind of back to what Jeremy was talking about just a minute ago. I've never seen a robber yet in a gun store. I've never seen an assault in a gun store. So if you are a criminal and you know that it is a high likelihood that as you bust down that door or you try to sneak in at night, that homeowner is armed, that would make you think twice about that, wouldn't you think? Yeah, very good. Jeremy.
Every time this issue comes up, I'm reminded of the Archie Bunker clip I saw years ago when his daughter was giving the liberal tripe about these gun problems and deaths and lamenting it and giving him a guilt trip for not being more kind and caring about the whole situation. And he leaned over and said, would it make you feel better if they was all killed by knives? The issue is not about the weapon in the hand. The issue is about the weapon in the heart.
Yes.
And that's where we see the problem going on to, which it gets us back to, and maybe I'm just the one-trick pony that keeps bringing us to that, but it's the issue of religion and its availability in the public square. If we ban it, if we say that it is wrong and illegal and something evil, then of course we're not going to have its good influence in this country. And that's why we ought to support that issue so vehemently. And that's why I think that the framers were so wise in making those first two amendments in that order. The right to freely exercise your faith and the right to bear arms, they go hand in hand in many respects. With gracious apologies to my pacifist friends, convictionally pacifist friends, I think there's a good reason why those things go together.
Yeah, I would think so. One of the questions, and I'll take another phone call in just a minute, that someone asked a while back is, well, can you think of any examples of where somebody who was armed actually prevented a massacre? And the example I used at the time, just off the top of my head, because it's a national example, was Pearl, Mississippi. You might remember a number of years ago where you had the 16-year-old actually stabbed and killed his mother, then started taking his gun and boom, 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 killing these kids, actually at a Bible study, or it was a kind of a prayer meeting outside of the school. I don't want to overplay that, but he did this at the high school. And as he was doing that, the assistant principal, Joel Myrick, was able to get his handgun, which was in the car, because it's, quote, a gun-free zone, but was able to get his gun from the car and stop the individual from doing that. So that was the one I mentioned at the time. But I thought, since we're talking about Atlanta, I thought I'd pick one of the examples out of Atlanta. And this happened a number of years ago. Calvin and Jamal, I won't say their last names, broke into an apartment during a party, forced everyone on the floor. They gathered various valuables, separated the men and the women, and then now Levant said to Hill, we're about to have sex with these girls and we're going to kill all of them. So, I mean, they're overhearing the fact that, first of all, we're going to have, we're going to rape the women and then we're going to kill everybody. So it's gotten really out of hand. And so then they start having conversations about paraphernalia, which I won't get into, the number of bullets in their guns. And at this point, one of those individuals on the floor, again, it's back to the Marines, a former Marine, of course, never a former Marine, Sean Barner, was able to then get to his backpack. He, although was a Marine, he was now at Georgia State. And so as a result, he was part of the Marine Enlisted Commissioning Education Program and happened to have, isn't this fortunate, a gun in his bag. And so he's able to crawl over there before the guys paid attention to that. He goes in the room where one of them was trying to rape one of the women and shoots at him as he's being shot at. So he's caught in the crossfire. He then is able to shoot the other one who ran off, later died of his injuries. And a lot of people say, well, would they have killed everybody? Because I love this, because now then the argument that comes back is, well, yeah, but this wasn't a massacre. Well, it would have been if he hadn't shot it. And of course then, and one of the women did get hit. She wasn't killed, but she was shot in the crossfire that took place. But that particular incident is just one of dozens that people have collected over the years about what could have been a horrible massacre. And fortunately, he had a firearm, knew how to use it as a Marine, used it effectively, and prevented a rape, or the rapes of all the women, and probably a mass murder that would have taken place.
Yeah, and you can go on Facebook and today see several videos like this of people. The one sticks in my head is a video, or internet cafe rather, where some men come in and try to steal things, and they're clearly two young thugs, and some old granddad pulls his pocket carry out and chases them off rather viciously.
I did see that one. So there's a couple of those there, but otherwise, let's take maybe one more phone call. We're just about out of time. We'll head out to California one more time. KYCC. Kevin, what would you like to share with us?
Hi, yeah, as we discussed the economic environment with political parties, I'm reminded of the quotation just a couple years ago from a gentleman by the name of Alexander Tyler.
It's Tytler, yes. And go ahead. I think you're talking about the democracies exist until they eventually figure that they can vote themselves money. Isn't that what you're talking about?
1783 was the year in which that quote originated, I believe. So it's funny to think of how many years ago this very concept originated, and yet what have we learned since then?
And again, I will caution some people. There are a few quotes that have been attributed to Alexander Tytler in the 18th century that are not attributed to him, but the truth of them is that democracy will only exist until the various people, voters, figure out how they can vote themselves largesse from the Treasury. Or my more contemporary quote, which I can verify, from Margaret Thatcher: socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. Sooner or later, they run out of other people's money. And so that quote is very easily verified. And it just shows again that, socialism sounds really good. And it sounds like the Tooth Fairy. And it sounds like the Easter Bunny. And it sounds like Santa Claus. But I love what Tim Wildman said. Santa Claus can't hold a candle to what is being promised right now in some of these debates. And as I pointed out to you just a minute ago, let's just go down that road for a minute. Let's assume we could confiscate all the wealth of the richest billionaires and millionaires. We don't have enough to run the government. That's going to come back to increasing the taxes of the middle class. Those of you listening to this program.
And we were not organized as a country to do legalized theft. That's not how the IRS... Look, we understand as a country that we're giving up certain rights. We do have... I think there's a necessary and good right for a certain level of taxation to be able to fund a government.
Of course.
There are certain things we cannot do to provide for the common defense as a very clear example of that. It's hard for me to raise a Navy. And that's necessary for us to pay a certain amount to make that kind of thing happen. But look, it is not the government's property, that which is sticking in my back pocket. And it is not their right to stick their hand in my back pocket to be able to take it. It's not... Davy Crockett, I think, was the one that said that on the floor so many years ago. They said, look, it's not our money.
Yeah.
It belongs to our people.
Yes.
And we ought to follow that good man's example and allow it to remain our money.
Your action item, in case you didn't hear it in the first hour, is that we need to support Coach Joseph Kennedy. And so if you go onto the website there, we give you a link to libertyinstitute.org, and you'll see this red button, a letter to support Coach Kennedy, and we'll find out tonight what he's going to do. I already know what he's going to do. The only real question is whether the school board and whether the administrators will do anything or whether they'll back down. And so, Jeremy, we can maybe report next week what happens. And if you get up there, give us a call.
I'll do that. I'm sure we'll have lots to report next week.
I know Hiram's up there, and some of you probably see some of it on the news before we talk about it on Monday. But take the time to visit our website, pointofview.net. You're going to find all those action items, all the articles we mentioned here today. And again, we make that available so that you can be more effective. I want to thank Andrew, Catherine, and Chris for their help behind the scenes. Have a great weekend. See you back here on Monday.
Modern life is go, 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 and Point of View is absolutely ready to go with you. I dare say that most of us have access to either a smartphone or a tablet, maybe even a computer that is app-based. There's a new way to keep up with Kerby and the team, the free Point of View radio app. With quick links to listen to the program live, to keep up and share Kerby's meaty and insightful viewpoints, commentaries, read articles on issues we're talking about that impact you and your family. Did you know you can also watch the show? Yes, radio with cameras. You can access that through the app as well. There's a link to our action alerts, how to find us on the radio across the nation, ways to contact us, and so much more. Visit your app store, iTunes or Google Play. Search for the Point of View radio app. There's no reason not to take us with you. The free Point of View radio app, available now for Apple and Android devices. And when you get it loaded, there's one more button I'd like you to press, the one that says Donate Now. Join Truth Team 360. Support us financially as we support you with the truth that you need.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.